The movie opens, and a young man named Ben is seeing his therapist today. His dad hired one of the best therapists, Dr. Holloway. She assures him and his parents there will be a remarkable difference in Ben's mental well-being in less than 6 months. Today, he isn't feeling his best. She comes over and introduces herself, extending a handshake. Ben, dressed in his singlet and boxers, ignores the offer to shake hands. The therapist sits opposite him and asks him to rate his level of functioning, on a scale of 1–100, with 100 being the best and 1 being the worst. Without a second thought, Ben responds, saying he feels like a 1 at the moment. The therapist wants to write up his level to 20, but Ben insists he feels it's 1. The therapist responds by stating that if he truly is a 1, then he would be a zombie. Ben maintains his answer. She proceeds to ask him the second question, requesting him to choose a number from 1 to 7, where 1 signifies extreme depression requiring hospitalization, and 7 signifies full-blown mania. Ben replies that he is a 2, but also somehow a 5. Dr. Holloway assesses him and concludes that he is in a mixed state, experiencing depression and mania simultaneously. Ben questions her about whether she possesses a medical degree, to diagnose him as such. The next scene cuts to reveal Ben sitting in the back seat of a car driven by his father, his mother seated beside him. They are on their way to school. Ben complains about needing a dry cleaner because all his clothes are dirty and wrinkled. His mother suggests that the school might have an iron, but he reminds her that it's the 21st century, and he prefers to have his clothes dry cleaned. They finally arrive at the school. Together they enter an office, where Ben's mother is warmly welcomed by the smiling secretary. David Glass, Ben's father, introduces Ben to the woman, and she shakes his hand. David expresses his gratitude to her for accommodating them, and she assures him that the Student Disabilities Office is there to assist Ben in every way possible. His parents drop him off at his hostel, and they both give him a warm hug, encouraging him to do well at this school, as this is the second university he is attending. Ben gets to his hostel, and first offloads all the prescription pills he's on. He attends his first class for the semester, and the professor asks them to introduce themselves to the class. Ben listens to a young man introduce himself to the members of the class as Brian. He is a new transfer student and hasn't decided on a major yet, which he thinks will be between business school and fine arts. He then makes a joke about being bipolar with his interests. Ben doesn't find this amusing, as he tells the class he is a film major student and also a transfer student. He remarks that unlike Brian, he is bipolar, but he prefers to call it recklessly extravagant. After his introduction, the professor announces that their first assignment is going to be a short film based on their real-life experiences. The next scene shows Ben in his room, his roommate smoking. He notices the stack of on Ben's table and asks him what all the are. Ben responds that this particular is for his ADHD. His roommate smiles at Ben's explanations when he tells him that the make him stay calm. Ben pours himself a shot of vodka and Coke and reveals to his roommate that he takes this combination with his Adderall. His roommate Griffin is surprised by this and wants to know if this combination won't fatally harm him. Ben takes the and heads to a house party with Griffin. The combination of and alcohol gives him a feel-good effect. In the club, he goes to talk over with some girls, but they ignore him. Griffin is embarrassed by this. While at the party, his phone begins to ring. It's his mom. Ben takes a moment to respond to his mother on the phone. Afterward, he goes out and sits on the pavement, trying to recollect himself. A lady wearing a yellow gown comes to sit beside him, smoking a cigarette. He recalls her name to be Daisy. She's from his film class. He introduces himself as Ben, and she remembers him as the student who explained his bipolar disorder as someone living a recklessly extravagant life. She hands over the cigarette. The alcohol is beginning to influence his behavior, and he feels confident. He tells her he's as extravagant as Odysseus. She finds this funny. They both go over to her room, and as they both awkwardly remove their clothes, he explains why he likens himself to Odysseus, who is a highly temperamental legend prone to maniac episodes. They have sex, then lie in bed. She informs him she has to be in school early the next morning, as she's in the debate club. Ben asks if they can always do this, and if he can stay at her place a little longer. She warns him he shouldn't take what they're doing as anything special, and he should leave now, as she has to go early in the morning. He feels downcast at this. He has always thought that having sex means a lot, but maybe he's wrong. The next day he attends class, still hungover and feeling terrible. He lays his head on his desk, hearing the professor giving out instructions on what he would love to see in their films. The professor asks the students if they have any idea of what they want their films to be about. The professor's attention is drawn to Ben, who has been quiet all through the lecture. Ben responds that he hasn't been feeling fine, apologizes to the professor, and leaves the class. Ben goes home in a state of mania and depression, and texts Daisy informing her of his intention to take a As soon as he texts her, he takes a drowns them with alcohol. Ben awakens to a blinding light and finds himself surrounded by wires connected to his chest. He blinks his eyes open, met with the gaze of an older-looking man peering intently at him. The man introduces himself as Dr. Bradley, the dean of students. He tells Ben that they are a close-knit community at Penrith College, and he wouldn't want to put anyone at risk. He proceeds to ask Ben why he overdosed on his medication. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Ben hesitates before admitting that his motives are deeply personal. Dr. Bradley tells him that his reasons cannot be personal if they involve other students around him. Ben apologizes for his actions. Dr. Bradley asks him if he feels being in college is best for him, suggesting that he might want to take a break. Ben is discharged from the hospital, and he's in his room sorting his medication when Daisy enters. She has come to check on him. Ben tells her not to worry about him and assures her that he's fine. He makes a joke about being given a lollipop at the hospital, but Daisy doesn't find it funny. She watches him as he sorts his medication and then takes her leave, fearing that he's about to repeat overdosing again. In the next scene, Ben sits in Dr. Holloway's office, recounting the events of the previous night. He explains how he was sorting his medication when Daisy entered the room, and she expressed concern about his well-being, seeing all the meds on the table. He wasn't attempting to harm him, he reassures Dr. Holloway. He was simply organizing his medication as prescribed. Shortly after Daisy left, police officers abruptly stormed into his room and took him into custody. Due to a prior incident involving an overdose attempt, this new accusation has resulted in a second strike against Ben. As a consequence, the dean of students has requested his departure from the college. Ben finds this decision utterly absurd and expresses his frustration to Dr. Holloway. He informs her that he has requested an appeal hearing to challenge the dean's ruling. Dr. Holloway asks how he plans to appeal the case. He responds that his dad won't let him get a lawyer. Instead, he wants to make a movie to explain what happened, and hopefully he will be granted another chance to continue schooling. She suggests he take a break from school, but he disagrees, saying he only came for his prescription. He leaves her office to hang out with his classmates, hoping they'll be in his movie. However, they all decline and tell him his idea is crazy. He needs a lawyer. The next day, Ben has another session with his therapist, who has noticed his mental health getting worse. She tells him she'll increase his medication, because if his symptoms aren't treated, he might fall into depression. Feeling down, he confesses he's a loser and can't attract girls naturally. He mentions going to a strip club that evening to find a relationship, but she discourages him, explaining it's not the right place for that. Ben is currently at a nightclub, where a girl is lying on a flat surface. Sushi rolls are placed on her body, and men are paying to eat sushi from her. After some time at the club, he's bored. Ben decides to go back to his apartment. While waiting outside for a taxi, a young beautiful girl comes up to him and asks if he has a lighter. He says no, and she then asks the same question to a group of boys nearby. They instantly realize that she is the same model they were eating sushi from, and they start making disrespectful and sexual jokes about her. Ben notices their offensive behavior and approaches them, confronting and pushing them away. They are surprised by his boldness and leave the lady alone. Ben expresses his disbelief to the girl about the way they spoke to her. She tells him that she is accustomed to such harassment from men. They both introduce themselves. She tells him she's Emma Taylor, and he tells her his name is Ben Glass. He intends to shoot a movie for school. She giggles and hands him her contact card. She tells him she shoots movies too. He is eager to know the type of movie production she does. She informs him he needs to subscribe before he can see them. On the ride to school the next day, Ben subscribes to her site, and then he realizes she does adult-rated content. Ben spends the whole day obsessing and writing the script for his personal story movie, which will be used for his appeal. He asks Griffin to feature in the movie, but he declines. At this point, Ben is beginning to think he may be the only character in this movie. He visits his parents, and his dad does not approve of the movie he's thinking of making. He feels it's a terrible idea and advises his son to transfer to another school. Ben disagrees with him. He is sure the movie will clear up the misunderstanding the night Daisy came into his room. Ben's dad tells him not to make any movies until he talks to the Dean of Student Affairs. Ben is beginning to feel everyone is out to frustrate his plans. In the next scene, we see Ben's dad talking to his friend Mani, who came to visit his office. Ben enters the office and interrupts their conversation. His dad asks him to be quiet, but Ben continues speaking. He insists he needs to make a movie to prove his innocence. His dad tells him firmly that he can't make any movie. In response, Ben threatens to stop taking his medication until his dad supports his decision. Mani asks Ben what kind of movie he plans to make. This makes David angry. He asks both of them to leave his office. Later that evening, Ben's parents are woken up by loud music coming from Ben's room. They go to his room and ask him to turn it off, since it's 3 a.m. Ben insists that the music helps him relax. When his mother asks if he's been taking his medication, he says he isn't, and won't take it until they get him a lawyer. A few hours later, Ben's parents are at Dr. Holloway's office. They inform the doctor about what happened earlier, and how Ben refuses to take his medication unless he gets a lawyer. Ben insists that he doesn't need any medication. He claims to feel better without it, and believes he now has special powers to control the weather. He's tapping his feet and has 1,000 ideas at the same time. Concerned, his therapist advises him to keep taking his medication, because he is currently going through a manic episode, and might become depressed if he continues to ignore his treatment. She tells him that she has treated many patients in the past, and her experience warns him that he might crash soon. At the same time, Ben is texting Emma and asking if they can make a movie together. Emma texts him back, saying she's at the coffee shop. While his parents are still talking to Dr. Holloway, Ben suddenly stands up and informs everyone he needs to go somewhere. They remind him he's in the middle of a therapy session, but he doesn't care and leaves in a hurry. He meets Emma at the coffee shop and informs her he just left his parents at the therapist's office. Ben tells her he is wondering why they don't believe him when he tells them about his superpowers, like being able to go without sleep and run faster than cars. He also mentions that he stopped taking his medication because he feels a lot better without it. Emma asks him about his diagnosis, and he begins to list them to her. He has ADHD, borderline personality disorder, OCD, bipolar disorder, and other conditions. She advises him to keep taking his medication, saying it's important. She notices he's acting a little weird. Then she asks about the script for the movie he wants her to be in. He says he has it all in his head, and will put everything together soon. He brags he will make her the major star of his movie. Emma informs him that she has a film shoot today and needs to leave. After leaving the coffee shop, Ben goes back to Dr. Holloway and informs her about the lady he met at the strip club and all the incidents that happened. He informs her of his decision to include her in his film. Dr. Holloway does not think it's a good idea for him to be friends with an escort, as he can be easily influenced. He decides to take Emma's advice though and continues with his medication. His parents are surprised and pleased at his change of heart. Ben decides to visit his dad's friend, Monty, who now resides in his mom's garage after the divorce from his wife. He tells him about his film idea and how Emma, his new friend, will star as Daisy, acting out everything as it happens on that day. Monty says the script has depth and is a good idea. He is willing to produce the film for Ben, but mentions it will cost him about $5,500. Ben spends more and more time with Emma Taylor, and he begins to realize that he's developing a strong attraction to her. As he gets to know her better, he discovers that she engages in intimate relationships for financial support. Despite this revelation, he believes that what they share is unique and special. He can sense it in his heart. One day, Emma invites him to a photo shoot where she is modeling swimwear. Before the shoot begins, she introduces Ben to the photographer as her dear friend. However, the photographer seems disinterested and pays him no attention. As he watches her change from one bikini to another, he is carried away by the beauty she exudes without clothes. He has never had this level of feelings for anyone, not even Daisy. After the shoot, as they get into his car, he asks her to marry him. She looks at him with disbelief and tells him it's not possible, since they have just known each other a few days. He then asks her to meet his parents. On second thought, she agrees to this. Emma and Ben meet up with Ben's parents at a local bar. They both seem very friendly and chatty. They ask her how she met him, and she tells them they met outside a strip club. Ben whispers to her not to mention anything about the movie to his parents. They all have a good time getting to know each other. Emma agrees to play the role of Daisy in Ben's movie. They need to come up with a way to raise the money needed to produce the film. Ben comes up with an idea. He will create a FundMe account and solicit funds from the public. He takes Emma to Monty's garage for the video, where they plead with the public for funds to aid in producing the movie and fighting for justice. Once the account and video are set up, Ben is not at ease. They haven't been able to reach their goal, and he needs the money in less than 8 days to fight his cause. He worries that he won't reach his goal and will be kicked out of college. The more he thinks of a way to come up with money, the more restless he becomes. There's no other way to raise money. His parents do not care about his project. He reaches out to Dr. Holloway, who advises him to quit his delusional idea of making a movie. Ben can feel he is nearing a psychotic episode. Ben doesn't give up. He wakes up at night and steals his mother's jars of coins. He puts the coins in a bag and sneaks out in the early hours of the morning, his parents unaware of his plan. He stops a taxi and demands that the driver take him to a place where he can convert the coins into paper currency. The taxi driver refuses to drive without an actual address and tells him to get out of the car. Ben loses control and locks the driver inside, screaming. He calls his dad, who is surprised that Ben still intends to make the movie. Concerned about his unstable state, Ben's dad takes him to the psychiatric hospital, where he is immediately admitted for a psychotic breakdown. Ben is at the hospital, feeling trapped and frustrated. He wants to leave so he can find a way to get the money he needs for his film project, but he cannot yet. His mom is with him at the ward, and before leaving she gently suggests that he should consider the option of transferring to another school, but just the thought of it upsets him. Ben wants all of them to understand that his intention to produce this movie isn't just about staying in school, but about fighting for justice. The school, Dr. Holloway, his parents, and everyone else misunderstood his actions. He may have mental issues, but he still has his rights, and he wants his side of the story to be heard. When his friends come to visit, they all try to cheer him up and lighten up his mood by making jokes, but their presence doesn't make him feel any better. His focus is to make this film. Monty and Emma visit him too. Tomorrow is the deadline to get the money, but he hasn't made much progress. Monty tells him that his plans are unrealistic at this point, and Emma suggests they try to work with a smaller budget, Ben rejects all their suggestions. He believes that even though there's only 24 hours left, they will somehow raise the money. He thinks that people will contribute because he believes it's his destiny to do this project. His faith is unwavering. Ben leaves the hospital the next day, and he's home in his room. He looks at his screen and sees that there are only a few minutes left for the donation deadline, and he has barely made $500. Suddenly, he cannot believe what he sees. Someone has made a donation to reach his target. He is excited. This is a dream come true. In the next scene, Ben is in Dr. Holloway's office. He is happy and lying on the couch. Dr. Holloway asks him how he feels after coming back from the hospital, on a scale of 1 to 100, with 1 being the worst and 100 being the best. Ben says he feels 100. Dr. Holloway considers his recent hospital stay, and the fact that he took his mom's money and tried to steal a car, so she puts his rating at 70. She asks him why he looks so excited, and he tells her that he has raised all the money, thanks to a single anonymous donor. She thinks it must be someone who knows him. Ben tells her they will start filming in 5 days. She warns him to be careful, because he's still in his manic phase. The next day, Ben calls Emma to start practicing their lines and rehearsing. Ben and Emma finish producing the movie, which Ben names A Huge Misunderstanding, where Ben Glass acts as himself, and Emma takes on the role of Daisy. After production, they both go to drink coffee, and she invites him to her house. While at her house, he asks her why they cannot date. He obviously likes her, and he knows she feels the same. But Emma tells him he's not taking her seriously and that no one ever does. She thinks he's just trying to sleep with her. Her assertion hurts him, and he tells her about his life struggles and the many attempts he has made on his life. He reveals he has never told anyone, so for him to divulge this to her, it means he takes her seriously. The next day at a coffee cafe, they get into an argument publicly over their individual orders. Ben loses his cool and speaks rudely to Emma. In response, she tells him he should have some respect for her, since she paid the whole $5,000 anonymously for his stupid film. Ben is shocked by this information and tells her he cannot pay her back, as he has less than $200 in his savings. Emma walks away, proclaiming she doesn't need his money or his film. After his disagreement with Emma, the days that follow weigh heavily on him. The day before his meeting with the school panel to decide his fate, he has another session with Dr. Holloway. In the session, he tells Dr. Holloway about the incident that happened yesterday, when he was hanging out with his friends. They were simulating shooting with his group of friends, and suddenly he felt like he was having a heart attack. She explains that his body reacted that way because of his disagreement with Emma, and how he feels about her breaking up with him. His relationship with her is overwhelming his physical body. She reminds him that continuing their relationship isn't good for his mental health. On the day of the hearing, he finds himself in a small conference room with the dean of students and other panel members, seated and anxious. The dean reads out the alleged crime he is accused of, which is trying to overdose on after a previous attempt and being issued a strike. He immediately denies the accusation. Mrs. Morgan, the secretary of the Department of Student with Disabilities, is called upon as a character witness and also to give her assessment of him. She acknowledges his potential as a young man, but she also states that he poses a danger to him and others in the community. This comes as a huge surprise to Ben, as this isn't what he expected to hear from her. The dean acknowledges that Ben has a movie he wants to show them. The first scene reveals him and Emma, who is playing Daisy, in his room, discussing Odysseus while taking off their clothes. However, he has a change of heart and closes the laptop. He realizes that the panel members have already made up their minds, and at this point, there's nothing he can do to change their decision. Defiantly, he starts walking out of the room. The dean warns him that if he leaves, there will be no place for him in the school. With a quick glance around the room, Ben continues walking out, leaving all the panel members surprised by his unexpected action. Ben is aware that Emma is leaving for Los Angeles for a while. He decides to go to her house in the rain and apologizes for the fight. Even though he has known her for such a short while, he experienced a combination of emotions just by having her as a friend. Dr. Holloway may not agree to this, but her presence in his life makes him better at navigating his feelings. Even though he's leaving Penrith College, he knows he must contain his emotions and not go into a psychotic breakdown. He takes his medication correctly, and all of this is thanks to Emma. She is a good friend to him, and he doesn't want her to go away feeling sad about his behavior towards her. She accepts his apology and promises to see him when she comes back. Before getting into her taxi, she pulls him forward and gives him a kiss. That kiss means a lot to him. As he walks back home, he knows he's a changed person, changed for the better.